staff that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and that the recording will be made available on the Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting. I further remind all present that local government decision-making affords no protection to councillors, council officers, and the public for comments made during meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. Before I go any further, I'd like to pass the rako to Councillor Tafo to provide us with our opening karakia.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair, tēnā tātou ngā councillors o tēnei o tō tātene kaunira o te rā ki ngā kaihautu o te waka, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia tukuna tēnei karakia kia tātou katoa. Kia tau te rangi Māori o rangi nui e tuiho nei o Papatuanuku e takato nei. O te tae ao e awhi nei ki rungi a tātou o toi moana e tau nei Te Hei Māori ora. May the peace of the sky above, of the earth below, as we of toi moana embrace the universe and its surroundings upon us, behold it is life. Tēnā tātou.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm calling for apologies. I only have one apology at the moment, and I'm unsure whether Councillor Karatai will be coming over on Zoom. So the only apology I have at the moment is Councillor Karatai. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Dougal and a second, Councillor Graham. All those in favour say aye. Those against, there are none. Thank you, councillors. Carried. Just moving through our agenda for the day, public forum. There are no public forum speakers for this meeting. Items not on the agenda. I have not been advised of any late items for this agenda. Order of business. There are the following changes to the agenda. Item 9.4, the Quayside presentation scheduled for 10:30 a.m. will now be covered as the last item in the open section. The remainder of the agenda will be adjusted upwards to allow for this change. Can I have a mover and seconder to transfer the public excluded business into the open? Oh, sorry. Just disregard that. I was just getting ahead of myself. Declaration of conflicts of interest.
Yes.
Oh, apologies. Can I just have a second? Can I have a seconder, please, for the changes in the agenda? Councillor Tafo, thank you. Moving on from there, declaration of conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest to be cleared for this agenda?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 9.4, Quayside Annual Report Briefing.
Thank you, Councillor Crosby. Public excluded business to be transferred into the open. Is there any public excluded business? No, we're going to address that.
Through the chair, that it's if the councillors who are the ones who decide if things should be in confidential or open have an issue with what's in the confidential section, they now have an opportunity to question that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we move to our minutes on page 10 of your agendas. Can I have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Seconder, thank you, Councillor McMillan. Any discussion? There are none. I have a mover and seconder. I do have one item in regards to the minutes, and I'll allow Tawna to speak to that.
Through the chair, there's just a couple of amendments to the minutes that are reflected already. For the record, that is that the Ohiwa Harbour Implementation Forum is a joint committee, not as an advisory group. That was said at the previous meeting. And that Councillor Karatai is the alternate member on the Eastern Bay Joint Committee, not a fully fledged member. Thank you.
So I have a mover and seconder for the minutes. Part of that amendment will be part of that approval from the mover and the seconder. So all of those in favour say aye. Those against, any against? Thank you, councillors, carried. So we'll move directly to our reports, and our first report is around the Te Aroha Lakes Trust request for Crown funding transfer. And we'll welcome staff. Helen Craig, Chris Engel. Thank you, staff. I'll hand it to you. Thank you.
Morena koutou. Morena. So I've take the report as read, but I'll just clarify the recommendations of the paper. So the request is by Te Aroha Lakes Trust told for an allocation of $2 million of Crown funding, so not regional council funding, Crown funding, which is currently allocated to the regional council in the deed of funding with the Crown and TALT and RLC for the Rotorua Te Aroha Lakes Protection Program, Restoration and Protection Program. When a request is made to change how the funding is allocated in the deed, it requires unanimous approval from the strategy group before it is proposed to the minister. And so TALT have asked the regional council and the other and RLC to for our position on it, and that will be taken back to the strategy group by the members here at the Rotorua Te Aroha Lakes Strategy Group meeting at the first meeting next year. So there's a similar change to this that was approved in January this year, which was a transfer of $10 million to Rotorua Lakes Council for an overspend on the Rotorua sewage reticulation scheme, and Rotorua Lakes Council must start paying that back into the deed starting in 2027. And staff recommend that there is some operational flexibility to enable this reallocation of funding to TALT, provided it is either repaid into the program to achieve the sustainable nitrogen load for Lake Rotorua or contributes to achieving that goal by 2032. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Any questions from councillors?
No, that was great. Thank you, Helen. I was wondering whether the $2 million was actually allocated to a particular project that we needed, but it's not. It's actually just allocated as our pool of the deed funding.
It is allocated to either the incentive scheme or the construction of wetlands for the purpose of achieving the sustainable nitrogen load. Yeah. So it's set out in the deed like that for that purpose. Yeah.
And I understand from your report that the reallocation isn't going to make it any harder for us to achieve those goals in the short to medium term, as long as it comes back. So I'm happy to accept the report, but I would like to move an amendment to the resolution, and where it has section 2, which is agrees the reduction in funding. I was thinking about this, and it would be good if it's not just about the money we need back, but if it's genuinely about the outcomes, that we could move an amendment and so that it would read that it agrees the repayment of the $2 million could either be in cash or delivering the equivalent value in verified nitrogen reductions through a new program process. And that will allow our partners to contribute the benefits of water quality or the relative money back to us. Is that something we could look at doing?
Yes. So provided, my recommendation is provided that that $2 million goes towards delivering the sustainable nitrogen load for Lake Rotorua, which is the purpose for which it's allocated in the deed at the moment, then as long as that purpose is met, then that meets the objective, basically. The outcomes in the deed. The deed sets that outcome. The Crown requires we deliver that outcome for the money.
You, Madam Chair. Yes, I think councillor Grayling's suggestion, although we haven't got an amendment at this stage, has a lot of merit. But there's another aspect to recommendation 2 that I think perhaps needs clarification, where it states that this agreement is conditional on repayment of the 2 million to the regional council. And I'm just wondering whether we don't need to expand that a bit and say something along the lines of all the successive body that may be responsible for the operation of the program. Because in the repayment time, we know that the governance or government has signalled the removal of the governance of regional councils. The entity will continue, but even that will have, with a restructuring of local government, there may not be a regional council as an entity at some point. And I think we just need to cover that off and perhaps expand that a bit so that it's clear that that money has to be repaid, but to the program. Otherwise, Holt could say, well, there's no body, we had to repay it to the regional council and that doesn't exist anymore. So therefore that doesn't apply. But we do want the outcome of that money to the program.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think that's a really good point. So because it's actually the Rotorua Te Lakes program, could we recommend that it goes back to the Rotorua Te Lakes program, even though that's not a legal entity as such, but it was what's referred to in the settlement legislation that created the funding? Would that work, Helen?
So it could be, you could say it's paid back into the deed of funding. But that, again, that's not a legal entity. But I mean, or its successor might be, or the entity that delivers that sustainable nitrogen load might work. Yeah. Yep.
At the moment, we haven't got a mover and seconder. We're now just working on the recommendations that someone will then move and second. So we don't have to run it specifically as an amendment to an existing motion. So if you're, as a team, are happy with doing it like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
Dougal.
We'll deliver.
Through you, Madam Chair. I understand Councillor Shirley's position, but given at this point in time the regional council is an entity and there is no change to change that entity, the announcements by the government is around about changing the governance of that entity. I feel we'll be moving into a status where anytime we mention the word regional council in any aspect of our business going forward, we're going to have to use that subsequent term. So at the moment, there is no challenge to the legal entity of the regional council. So therefore, I feel that changing that clause would just create more confusion because we don't know what legal entity it may or may not move to. So I think in a time of uncertainty, we would understand that if the legal entity or legal status of the regional council changes, then that will retrospectively be applied to the change we made. So that we might understand the point, but I don't think we've got a actual specific legal entity to point to that would be an alternative. So
I'll let the CEO respond.
Thank you and good morning, councillors. Yes, I recommend you go with the approach that the Deputy Chair has signalled. There will be a change to legislation at some point in time, and then it will be quite clear in that legislation what entity would replace the regional council, but at this stage that is not known or in place.
Oh,
Good, Madam Chair. Just a question. Would it not be safe for us to actually look into having the recommendation by Councillor Shirley in regards to that, especially long term? I think confusion is already out there in the public in regards to regional councils anyway. But the fact of the matter I was looking at from Councillor Shirley was around ensuring that we don't have to come back to this table again to discuss the same topic in regards to changing who they pay back to or what is being paid back to in regards to Anna's suggestion, which I fully support in regards to Anna's suggestion as well. Tēnā tātou.
very happy for our legal counsel to come to the table and explain what we anticipate will happen in July 2027, because the Regional Council is named in many pieces of legislation and settlements. And so, Monique, do you want to give a view in terms of how they might do it in July 2027?
Good morning, councillors. Through you, Chair. This is obviously just one piece documentation and legal documentation in terms of there are many that name Regional Council and we are involved in. If there at some point there is a reorganisation of this entity or other entities that are involved, that this would be worked through there. This would be undertaken in terms of an assessment of all liabilities, all assets, and that would be worked through in any reorganisation. So I would agree with the CE's recommendation that for now, Regional Council is the appropriate entity.
Thank you. So just clarification around this item. With Anna's suggestion to the amendment, we won't do an amendment to the current recommendations. What will occur is the suggestion being made by Councillor Grayling is that staff will take that into consideration when addressing this matter. So it won't disappear, but it will be taken into consideration.
Through the chair, my suggestion would be, now that you've got the recommendation up on screen, if the councillors are comfortable, we'll get a mover and seconder for the entire recommendation. If there is an issue with the amendment or any of the other resolutions, you can ask, for instance, that it be taken in parts, so you then get an opportunity, or once it's been moved and seconded as a full set, you can then propose amendments. A little cumbersome, but that's how it works. Thank you.
Councillor Maltby.
Madam Chair, I've got a question. If they take the option of delivering an alternative nitrogen reduction scheme, will that interfere with what we have planned? Or for example, should we include that we agree with them what that nitrogen program would be in lieu of cash?
I think based on what their current operational capabilities are in terms of their staff and their skill set, that what they would likely deliver would be a wetland. We also would like to deliver wetlands, but we could work with them on the site so that we didn't kind of cross paths on that. So I think it would work. I think it does mention through a new program process, which I assume is just verifying, which we would work up to be verifying the nitrogen gains made. So you would need we have a program of science which underpins our program and the investments we make, and that would Tarawā Lakes Trust work with the University of Waikato, who runs that program. And anyway, at the moment, so I think we would just work together to make sure that
So we'd verify, but should we also agree what the program is, or is verification enough?
Agree on the intervention, agree on the reductions.
Or agree on whatever program they propose? Should we be agreeing with it or just verifying it?
I think it would be, it would be a good idea to agree to it. Yes, I think it would be.
Through you, Madam Chair, would that be the process, I think, Tim, is that it would go back to the Rotorua Tarawā Lakes Strategy Group to approve any new intervention and expenditure. So there is a governing body. So it wouldn't just be that they say, here's a very small little puddle over here and it's worth 2 million. It would all be quantified and verified through that program process. And once we've determined that the value is equivalent to a $2 million intervention, then we would agree to that as an intervention in exchange for that 2 million.
Yes, I think we would work through this detail in the variation to the deed, and I think the MFE representatives will have some requirements too. They'll want some certainty. So a lot of when we made the original changes and the other changes in January this year, MFE were quite careful about pinning that back to us as well. So they said, you know, Te Arawa Lakes Trust will do these things, but the regional council must, you know, must support that, must agree with it, must verify it. So it was all about making sure we're all on the same page effectively, and working together on it.
Councillor van der Boom.
Madam Chair, thank you. This is just a question around process. Obviously, we can agree to delegate to the Chief Executive to go and negotiate on our behalf. And item 3 is just one point of negotiation or one offering. Do we see this agreement again, or in delegating that authority to the CE, is that it? We don't see it again.
Through you, Chair, the normal course would now be to the strategy group to approve this. And as Helen has said, it has to go to the Minister for approval. And so there is a bit of process around all of that. It is the Minister who approves the funding deed, and then you would get to see that back. We would, I've just taken a note to, after the next strategy group, to report back to Council in terms of what strategy group had determined. So we will have a report back loop for you, but ultimately it's the Minister who has the approval here.
Very much.
We have included an amendment to the, if you're looking at the screen, we have added another, sorry, recommendation.
So
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to move the,
that's what I was just going to say. Now, can we move a motion to accept the resolution in its entirety?
Moving. Thank you, councillor. I've got councillor Grayling moving. Seconder.
Second.
Okay, take this. I'll take councillor van der Boom. You were the first hand I saw. There's a seconder. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? Any against? There are none. Thank you, councillors. Very good. Carried. Thank you, staff. Chief Executive's Delegation Manual. And our presenters, Monique and Cindy. All yours.
Morning, Chair and councillors. This is an operational matter, so I'll take the report as read. Basically, at the start of every triennium, the delegations manual is reviewed and updated. So this is what this matter is about. I'm happy to take questions. Happy to move.
Councillor McMillan's moving, Councillor Campbell's seconding. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Oops, sorry. Councillor
Very quick
Crosby.
question. With regard to fast track approvals, which is new, what reporting back to the council, if there is one, on that?
Would you like?
Because they work at
Yeah.
pace, and we're a bit sensitive about the degree of input that regional councils can have in fast track approvals.
I don't have detail on that process specifically, but I can see Reuben joining now, and I'll definitely defer to him in that space.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I understand your question correctly, Councillor Shirley, we do regular reports last triennium to Monitoring and Ops Committee. I would envisage we carry on that to the Regional Delivery and Evaluation Committee with updates on all of the fast track proposals and where they are in the process.
Thank you. Any other questions? So we've heard a mover and seconder. All those in favour say aye. Those against? There are none. Carried. Thank you, councillors. Moving now to 9.3, Regional Infrastructure Fund, execution of documents on page 44. Staff presenters, Mark. Welcome, Mark.
Koto. I'll take the report as read, but I've got a few slides there. It's one back, I think, where I just want to highlight a number of the main points. So, first of all, of course, the Regional Investment Fund, we received $20 million worth of funding for Tranche 1. Just a very quick overview of where we're at. For the Kaituna, the Ford Road pump station that we're looking for a new name for. We've purchased the pump. We've done all of the agreements. We're got a design build contract underway, and we're looking to commence construction in March. So that's all going very well. The Kaituna stop bank upgrades are all designed out to tender at present for construction this financial year and next financial year. Talking stormwater upgrades complete. In fact, it's been complete for about a year. The Whakatane projects is Project Future Proof that some of you went on a little hikoi with us, and so we're well into that. Should be completed stage 2 by Christmas time, sometime next week. And then the Waibekere Tara project is currently out to tender. So yeah, good progress on those ones. Into Tranche 2. Now the word I want to use here is agility or agile. When we're dealing with central government, there's all sorts of changes occur. So there, originally it was going to be one tranche of work. They decided to split it into 2. They were concerned about some projects around consenting. And so basically, if you had a consent in place or didn't need a consent, you went into Tranche 1. Otherwise, you're into Tranche 2. So I appreciate that we went through a number of these when we met with the Ōpōtiki District Council on your little tour. But yeah, just wanted to go through a few items here. So that Ohinianga, we're just waiting on one landowner approval, and then we're ready to go. We're already under construction in some of the works in the Whakatane Tauranga scheme. Others are scheduled for later on. The Duke Street Stop Bank is the Ōpōtiki one that we touched on a few weeks ago. And then the Rangataiki one was the one that I really wanted to talk about, because this is where we had to be really agile. We were partway through the works and we discovered a whole lot of sand that we had to obviously replace. And so costs sort of went up. So we had the opportunity with another round of the funding to increase that value. And so we've done that. And I guess part of this paper is basically to come back here and dot the I's and cross the T's, which I'll take you through, I think, on the next slide. Yeah, so in terms of the updated estimates, so we've got one project there. Sorry, it looks like things have slipped down. The seepage control stays as it is. The Tarawera stop bank upgrades on the surface there, it looks like it stays as it is, but then I'll get to another slide where I'll explain that we want to use Tranche 3 to actually make up the shortfall. I'll explain that shortly. And then what we've found for the Rangataiki canals job, we're partway through that one. And again, we've had a whole lot of sand. And so we took the opportunity to basically increase that value as far as this funding is concerned. And then we haven't started the Rangataiki Canals one yet, but our geotech that we've just finished shows that we're going to hit some issues again. So both of those, essentially all 3 of those, 2 of them reflected in this paper, we're looking to increase by 600,000. So we want to also touch on Tranche 3. So we're at the process now where there's a draft document has gone into Minister Jones. It contains the top 3 items there as a draft priority. By no means is that finished. I note that for item 4, the value I didn't get round to putting in, but that's 3.5 million as well, just for your record. So there's a process that we'll go through in March. We'll do an update where we reprioritise right across the country, and it may mean that some of those, particularly number 4, might move up into the first priority list. So just a little bit about the Tarawera one, which I'm just going to use as an example for yeah, in this example, because it's more or less the same for the Rangataiki ones as well. So we're well underway. On the left bank, we've had 5 areas complete, 2 are held up for consenting. And for that reason, I've moved those into tranche 3, because otherwise we wouldn't have received funding from central government. And then in terms of the right bank, as it said, 1's complete and 4 we've just let the contract. In one of the stages, you'll get used to me doing this, is that we do some geotech investigation over here, and then we do some geotech investigation over there, and then we find something completely different in the middle. And so that picture that I've got there is a coarse sand stop bank, which is not good. So we actually had to dig out about 120 metres of stop bank, and this is in the Tarawera, which of course we then had to replace with better material, and you can see the contrast in that quality. So that's very much in a nutshell why I'm here asking for this more money. As I said, in terms of central government, we've already received that 60% funding. So whereas I'm asking for 1.2 million, we're receiving 2 million from the government. So it's a good deal. I'm not a used car salesman, by the way. So I'll leave it there and stop for questions.
Thanks, Mark. With the tranche 3, so what's the total amount we'll be applying for through tranche 3?
So across the country, what's that? 200 million?
Like Bay of Plenty.
Whatever those numbers
Yeah.
added to times by 0.6. Right, so
Those you've just put in, haven't you? Those last 2.
So currently it's that. So that's 8.4. 11.4. Yeah, 12 million. That's 60% of that is the subsidy. And hopefully we can get the Rotorua one, which is another 3.5 million. Just so you know, there's 770 million applied for across the country.
Yeah, so that was my next question. How confident are you that we will get? Because so you're saying we'll go up the list, but we still may not. Like, how do we know whether or not we're going to get that?
We won't know. We won't know until March, until we've done a lot more detail as far as that. So the first go at it was pretty coarse, but yeah, a lot more stringent will go in because of the timing. But now we've got a process that we can use, which is going to be a lot better for March. So.
Voting order, Councillor Shirley, Councillor Van der Boom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Certainly we did very well in tranche 1, I think best in the country, and mainly because we had programs organised and the work done all ready to go. And I think all of those works are really good, and the staff should be congratulated to bring it in that advanced form. I had a specific question though, and that was the slide you showed there, or the photograph of the inferior coarse sand component in that stop bank. And I'm not trying to portion blame, but was that originally built by the Catchment Commission days, or what's the history of that inferior? Because it's really should have never been there.
So back when these schemes were created, they won the material locally, and in the Tarawera catchment, there's a lot of volcanic material is washed down the Tarawera River, and that's what was available. We also find in the Rangataiki as well, where we've had to do a lot of work basically digging out this kind of thing in a whole lot of layers. So not ideal, but as I said, at the time in the late 60s, early 70s, that was how things were built.
Through you, Madam Chair. Mark, a question around tranche 3. You've mentioned that MB have indicated 60% funding. Is that concrete, or is that going to be determined in March next year or further down the track?
All indications are that it'll be 60. So if we go back through tranche 1 and tranche 2, that was 60. There is a difference though. Sorry, Johnny, can you? So the difference is this introduction of suspensory loans versus grant funded. So in the past, everything's been grant funded and very simple agreements are very simple. Suspensory loans is my description is they want us to have more skin in the game and that we have to deliver. So basically the term is that we need to have finished these projects within 5 years, otherwise they're not going to pay for it.
Okay.
So this is the change that we're seeing is less around the percentage and more around more stringent conditions as far as the loans or the grants are concerned. It's pretty unclear still as to how they determine whether it's a loan or a grant. They tried to tell us that it was if it was less than 1.5 million or it was going to be completed in the first year. The one that we've got grant funded doesn't fit into either of those, so we're still at a loss. But
So we still don't
anyway,
know.
we're happy to receive a grant funded over a suspensory loan.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Through the chair. Thank you, Mark, for that presentation. Just picking up on your comment about sand, and one thing we've seen is that constant sand coming down these waterways. And my question is just thinking a little bit more longer term too about we're looking at fixing, doing what we can to do protection at the bottom, and thinking about the upper catchment where that sand is coming from. And contributing to the problems. So is there the potential within this resilience infrastructure fund to look at natural infrastructure upstream and use this fund to look at that very long-term benefit and future land use acquisition or change up in the upper catchment?
That's a nice advertisement for the River Scheme Sustainability Project, which we'll be delighted to give you an update about in due course. But the short answer to your question is we aren't ready for tranche 3. We're likely to be ready for tranche 4, and the upper catchment work is a main part of that RSS project. So yeah.
Any other questions, councillors?
Move the recommendations.
Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Vanderboom, thank you. Any further discussion? None. Those in favour say aye. Those against? There are none. Carried. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Mark. Now, as I stated earlier, 9.4, the Quayside presentation will now be covered at the end of the open section. So we will continue to item 9.6 on page 156. The BOPLAS annual report for the year ended 30th of June 2025. I'll pass to Kamaran and Mark.
Marty, Madam Chair and councillors. So this report is to provide you an overview of BOPLAS's performance for the year ended 30 June 25. So BOPLAS, for the councillors that are unaware, is a vehicle established for delivering shared services to the Bay of Plenty. The company is owned by BOPRC and 8 other councils in the region. The company achieved all 6 of its performance targets for the year with an operating deficit of just over 9K. Revenue and expenditure exceeded budget, with the major variations provided in note 24 on page 47 of the attachment document. An analysis on note 25 to the annual report on pages 48 and 49 on the attachment shows that all projects except video conferencing made a neutral or positive contribution to the net operating position. Section 2.2 of the cover report sets out the non-financial performance achievements for the year. Happy to take any questions on that.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Shirley.
I have one concern. I think the report's very good, but it sort of concentrates on the micro rather than the macro. And I think the concept of BOPLAS is so excellent, but my question is, has it actually achieved its potential? And I think we had these discussions in the previous triennium that there was some frustration that its true potential was not realised largely through petty parochial patch protection. And given the emphasis now and messages from government on more shared services in procurement and other functions, things like why isn't there a common rating base for the whole of the Bay of Plenty councils, those sorts of things. So I guess my question is rather broad, but it's what more, what can we do to make sure this potential is achieved, particularly in the function form discussion that's going to be occurring in the next 2 years for the whole of local government, because this is critical to that. And does BOPLAS become redundant to that discussion, or is it going to become a key part of that discussion? I'm just sort of seeking information on that, because we're moving into a new world, and this is exactly why we're moving into a new world.
I'll allow the CEO to comment.
Thank you, Councillor, and it's an excellent question. I met with the chief executives around the Bay of Plenty last Friday. We were all very keen to continue to collaborate and investigate more shared services. There is an informal mayoral forum this Friday, and we would like to take to the mayoral forum that they have an appetite for this and get direction from the mayoral forum. It was a very constructive meeting with the chief executives, recognising exactly what you're saying, as there is a need to look at more shared services in the Bay of Plenty.
And through you, Madam Chair, I'd just like to tautoko exactly what you've said, because I know it's probably really tough timing presenting a shared services and meeting all the targets at the same time when government's saying we're just not doing enough and we haven't achieved enough in terms of cross-organisational efficiencies. So if we are going to be going back to the mayoral forum, I suppose it would just be saying, can we just have a conversation about scope? Because just doing shared services better, I don't think is enough. I think the scope of actually the efficiencies needs to be broadened beyond just sharing services in light of where we currently are. So just if you could take that back in terms of scope.
Any further questions or comments, Councillor Scrimgeour?
Yes. Well, support what Councillor Shirley's been saying. I was going to dig down into some of the detail. There's a comment about insurance rates and savings that were achieved last year, albeit, I believe, on top of very high increases the previous year. And it talks about confidence that further savings can be achieved this year. So I certainly like to wish the team all the best there as they negotiate that. But I just wanted to clarify in regard, it also mentions the aerial imagery work that is undertaken and contracts being awarded. I was just wondering if we could have a bit of an explanation about perhaps frequency of those mapping exercises and how frequently that is done.
So through the chair, I'll have to follow up on the frequency of the aerial mapping and get back to you. But on the savings from the insurance, we did have a BOPLAS meeting last Friday as well. I'm pleased to report there's an additional $200,000 in savings for this council in this financial year through the work of BOPLAS. And if I recall rightly, it's 1.4 million across the entire Bay of Plenty because of the work in insurance. So they have achieved a saving this financial year as well, and I will follow up on the aerial mapping.
Councillor McMillan.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify, because the director's here, Fiona, you're still down as a director, but isn't Matt Taylor now on? Oh no, or is that Regional Software Holdings? Yeah, sorry, my mistake. So you're staying on BOPLAS.
It's a very good opportunity for the chief executives to meet and get together, and it's pivotal now in terms of what Councillor Grayling and Councillor Shirley were talking about.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Vanderboom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question that relates to Diligent, page 329, so Statement of Financial Performance. I see that over the last 2 financial years, BOPLAS has run at a deficit. I wondered if you could just talk us through that data. In the agenda, it's page 190. It's page 31 of the annual report.
So I'm just trying to find the exact page that you've referenced. Boplas in general is a shared service organisation. It's not aiming to make a profit, it's aiming to break even. So that there's a small deficit in the individual year just reflects a bit of variance in targets, not an intentional rundown or intention to make a profit, but over time they should expect to approximately break even because they're passing on costs and savings. So some of those small deficits or surpluses in any one year aren't material. It's whether there's a long-term accumulation of deficits or profits that are a potential issue for sustainability.
My question is around if you're operating at a deficit 2 financial years in a row, what might we do?
Councillor, can you turn your microphone on, please?
It is on. My question is around if you're operating at a deficit 2 or more years in a row, what might you do differently?
That's primarily a question for Boplas and their board as an entity rather than for us as council staff to answer. However, when they set their budgets each year through their statement of intent process, that's when we have an opportunity to look at their financial forecasts and whether we think they are budgeting appropriately. So we will receive a draft statement of intent in March next year and have the opportunity to provide comment on their forward budgets.
And my last part of that question is who actually funds that deficit? Is it just taken out of cash reserves or how do you actually deal with that?
So that's funded from contributions made by participating councils.
News councillor, these figures don't have any zeros behind them. So the deficits you're talking about is $1,000 deficit, then a $9,000 deficit. But I will take that back in terms of recognising that's 2 years of deficits.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Can I have a mover and seconder then for this report? Thank you, Councillor Crosby. And a seconder, please, Councillor Grayling. All those in favour say aye. Those against, there are none. Carried. Thank you, councillors. Okay, moving to 9.7, New Zealand Local Government Funding Agency Limited Annual Report for the year ended 30th of June 2025. And we have same presenters. Thank you, guys.
So the LGFA is essentially to provide efficient financial services to local government. Regional Council holds 8.3% shareholding in the LGFA, and the LGFA has continued to increase the value of its loans to Council to 22.7 billion. Profit for the year was 19 million against a 10.1 million profit achieved for the previous year. Total operating income was higher and operating expenses was lower than forecasts compared to the statement of intent for 24-25. The company declared dividend of 1.7 million to the sector, and the LGFA achieved 17 out of its 21 performance targets for the year. There's 77 member councils and 8 CCO members that are eligible to borrow from the company. Highlights for the year include further diversifying sources of borrowing in offshore markets, enabling lending to new water council control entities, and the number of CCO borrowers increasing from 5 to 8. You'll note, councillors, in the report that the front part of the cover report indicates 17 out of 21 performance measures were achieved. And then later on in the cover report, it talks about 16 out of 20. And that's because when we were preparing the report, we picked up that there was one measure that wasn't covered in the annual report for LGFA, and we followed that up with the Chief Executive. And there was one additional measure covered in the statement of intent that wasn't covered in the annual report. And that measure is essentially providing an annual seminar for councils, updating them on latest sustainability developments, climate change impact, and LGFA reporting requirements. The target was for one of those per year, and that was met. So that's the reason why you've got 2 different totals in the report.
Councillor Vanderboom.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for that report. That was really interesting reading. I really just wanted to make a note in our meeting minutes that the climate action loan system was undersubscribed, and we have an opportunity to communicate to TLAs that there are opportunities there for borrowing for green buildings, sustainable transport, renewables, and climate change adaptation. So I just want to make that note in our meeting minutes, and wanted to make another note, and this is really in regard to, you've said that 17 of the 21 performance objectives were achieved, and I'd like to make a note that the CE of LGFA still received a close to $170,000 bonus, despite that not all performance objectives were not achieved, and that's on top of an $800,000 salary. That whole package is circa $1 million. And I just think that we have some responsibilities within local government to put a lens on these kinds of payments to chief executives, which are ultimately funded by ratepayers.
Thank you, Councillor, for that comment. I actually am a member of the Shareholders Council that oversees board performance, rotation of board members and the like. I'm happy to channel those messages to our next shareholder council meeting.
I'd appreciate that.
Through you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering, and again, it's possibly a silly question on my naivety, but what is going to be the implications of the rates cap on council's ability to borrow from this fund? Is there a link between the rates capping and the ability to leverage funding from this agency?
Or there's no borrowing cap, but essentially the cost to service any loans that council would take would essentially be funded from rates. So the rates cap may have an influence on the level to repay debt and service the costs of debt.
Through the chair, just to add to Mr. Perumal's comments, there are also a range of borrowing covenants that LGFA have, and some of those ratios are based on the level of rates income. So, for instance, there are limits on debt to rates income. So if rates only increase by so much, debt limits can only increase by so much. That will affect other councils far more than us because we are currently in close to a zero net debt position.
Potentially going to have quite an impact on some of our TLAs that are quite debt loaded, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Councillor Dougal, Councillor Scrimgeour.
My question is probably more of a follow-up to Councillor Grayling's. Could you give us some idea of the quantum of how the credit rating may be affected by the potential implementation of a rates cap?
So Standard & Poor's have already conducted some initial analysis on that. Over the past couple of years, the institutional framework rating for local government across New Zealand has already resulted in a number of downgrades. If these actions do result in a credit rating downgrade, each credit rating point is about 5 basis points or 0.05% impact on our borrowing costs. So the financial impact isn't necessarily huge, but it's a sustainability, a risk, and a confidence measure primarily.
So will that change the risk profile and the risk register going forward?
So as part of our long-term plan, we disclose our significant forecasting assumptions and the level of risk associated with each of those. We review those completely every long-term plan, but yes, that is one of the factors, interest rate risk, that is always noted as a forecasting assumption with a level of risk ascribed to it.
Yes, could you give us an indication of approximately how much lower our interest rates we pay are as in comparison to if we were reliant on the commercial banking sector?
We receive interest rates from LGFA roughly weekly, and I can share the latest forecast with latest interest rates with councillors. As an indication, the borrowing rates for short-term loans under a year vary from approximately 2.6 to 3%. For long-term loans, they vary from just over 3% to around 5% for 12-year loans. So they are depending on which institution you work through, they are lower than commercial arrangements. And I can share that information with councillors.
Yes, that's very positive. Appreciate that, and certainly the $140,000 of dividend that we received is an added bonus. Thank you.
Councillor Defoe.
Tēnā kōrua mihi nui. Thank you for your presentation. I've been hearing bits and pieces of the comments in regards to the rates cap and of course the money towards it, but I haven't really heard around the implications of the proposed LG local government rates capping to this particular entity in regards to what we are trying to achieve as a council. So my question basically is, what are those implications going to be in regards to the rates caps associated to this kaupapa?
So this particular paper is around LGFA borrowing. So rates caps for us, for this council, do not have a direct implication on our LGFA borrowing because we're well within limits. As noted previously, it will affect other councils and territorial local authorities far more than us, who are closer to their limits. In terms of our long-term plan process coming up, we will need to consider those rate caps when we're setting our budgets, and there may be some trade-off decisions to make around our levels of service. In the long term, one of the biggest implications for rates capping in my mind is that when we fund capital infrastructure across councils, the cost that comes into rates in later years as debt is repaid. So councils are going to have to be very careful and prudent in their asset management and be very aware of interest rate risk.
Thank you.
Councillor Grayling, Councillor Vanderboom.
So is it possible, so obviously we're in a very strong financial position in terms of our ability to borrow because of our debt to equity ratio. Is it possible for us to utilise the LGFA fund if one of our TAs is not in a position to be able to leverage the funding from themselves because of their financial situation? We could take the loan and pass on those benefits to one of our TAs?
So in theory, yes. The question is how we would then pass on those funds and recover them. So if we were to borrow and on lend to another council, that would still be debt on their balance sheet and would still affect their borrowing ratios. If we were to borrow and then grant the money or give the money to a council, to another council, yes, they could then do the work, but then the onus to collect the rating income, to repay the interest, repay the principal, would fall through our rates.
Councillor Vanderboom and Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. My question is an extension of Councillor Tafoe's question, which is not about us, but about TLAs throughout the region and the country. Do you see that rates capping could increase demand for LGFA borrowing or decrease demand? What do you anticipate happening?
So as a general matter of principle, capital expenditure is financed through borrowing and repaid through rates over the long term. So, whereas operating work is directly funded through rates. Councils are still required to meet the balanced budget requirement. So I think the implication is more likely to be that councils will have to carefully manage their levels of service and monitor efficiency rather than fund operating expenditure through increased borrowing.
My question was really around CapEx. So do you anticipate more borrowing for capital expenditure over subscription of LGFA, or are we going to see less demand? I don't feel like I've got a question an answer that I can understand.
Okay, so capital work is inherently linked to borrowing in general.
Understood, yes.
Yep. So there isn't a direct year-on-year link between CapEx and rates. The borrowing requirement is directly driven from the capital program. So if the capital program remains unchanged, the borrowing forecast should remain unchanged. The long-term affordability of repaying that capital borrowing, that is at
because
risk.
of the rates
so
cap.
If anything,
We
I
may
would
see less subscription to the LGFA.
because capital
Okay.
works may be unaffordable in the longer term.
Thank you. That was the answer I was looking for. Thank you very much.
Councillor Kumar, did you have your hand up?
Yes.
I think Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the chair. Thank you very much. Just wanted to know, previously, when councils borrowed money within the ceiling, they justified it saying that it was intergenerational debt and that it would benefit the next set of generation coming. Now with this rate cap coming on, what is the lifetime of this rate capping? Has there been a lifetime set on it? Is there a time period like this rate capping might be for 12 years, 15 years, or is this?
So recent legislative announcements on that hasn't indicated a term for that. The assumption could be that it's enduring, continuous, but that's the assumption. It's subject to further submission on the topic and what ultimately cabinet decides for the process.
And my follow-up question is that while we are discussing this rate capping now, and it's a new thing, I know councils previously have said, right, we need for our next long-term plan, 12% gets decided, gets voted down, and amongst rattled the ratepayers, they pay because they have to. But I'm just wondering whether this rates capping will then become the norm, and then we will work within the perimeters, because this is the first time that this legislation is forcing us to sort of saying, hey, this is what you are going to get, and this is what you're going to do your long-term planning around.
Councillor Crosby.
Make things more complicated for LGFA, you know, the Three Waters program is also going to put a spanner in the works when many councils transfer their assets and their debts and everything else over to CCOs. And I think they're planning on that, aren't they, Kamaran, in terms of quite a higher level of debt, indirectly and directly related to the Three Waters.
So, Madam Chair, yes, that is correct. And the signals on the borrowing profiles or the gearing levels for the CCOs would be a lot higher than what local authorities would have. So that would also place additional quantitative borrowing demand on LGFA to be able to supply those funds to the sector.
I think it's going somewhere around 280%, anything up to 500+% borrowing ratio, revenue to borrowings, which is just about double.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question relates to the risk, and that is it's a $5 billion lending fund, 5 billion, and it's the liability if there was a default. And, you know, there's public commentary about our ratepayers carry the risk and the liability for a defaulting council, which we have absolutely no control over. And I'm just wondering, are there any checks and balances in process? Has there been any defaults in loans, and what measures are in place to mitigate? And I guess we're moving into a whole new world with the increasing CCO situation, which Councillor Crosby referred to, but there is a factor there that of liability, and I am assuming that all participants share that liability for any default.
To the chair, yes, so there is a joint cross guarantee for participating councils. There has been no defaults to date from the sector since the inception of the company. The mechanism that's in place to ensure recoupment of funds if there is a default is the debenture trust deed. So all participating councils have a debenture trust deed in place, and that is the mechanism for the LGFA to trigger for a defaulting council to recover those funds from the defaulting council's ratepayer base. So that's the first port of call for recovering and the mechanisms in place to protect against servicing LGFA's costs from its investors.
You say a debenture, it's essentially a member's loan. So collectively, the participating members loan, which is in turn repaid somehow over time. Is that how that works as on a debenture?
So the debenture trust deed is purely a recovery mechanism that allows preference given to the LGFA in the event there's a default to be able to take to be able to call on the rating base for that specific council to recoup it. So the trust deed actually allows that to happen more than anything else. That's its primary purpose.
And does that have an exemption from the rating cap?
That was set before legislation covered that.
Any further questions, councillors? There being none, can I have a mover and seconder to receive the report? Thank you, councillor Maltby. Seconder, thank you, councillor Scrimgeour. All those in favour say aye. Those against, thank you, carried. 9.8, our next, thank you. Are you presenting again? Yes, you are. Same presenters on Regional Software Holdings Limited. Annual report for the year ended 30th of June. Over to you guys.
RSHL, yes, shared services organisation for the regional council, delivering a range of digital, operational and financial programs, and also provides support services to Te Huru Kaika. The operations are funded from levies received from participating councils in each of the programs. The company reported a net deficit after tax of just under $500,000 against a previous reporting deficit of 1.6 million. The deficit was lower than budgeted, with revenue being 845K ahead of budget and operating expenditure 549K more than budget. This resulted from additional activity to support the public transport ticketing system and Te Huru Kaika, offset by cost savings from the IRIS and IRIS Next Gen programs. Cash balances for the company remains healthy and mainly the losses are resulting from depreciation rather than trading activities. Section 2.2 of the cover report highlights non-financial matters covering shared services, governance and performance measures.
Questions, councillors?
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you. I've just got a question about why this entity exists and why it's not part of BOPLAS.
The focus of BOPLAS is shared services initiatives for the region, whereas RSHL is focused on the regional sector, so all regional councils across the country. So it's a different layer of focus.
Thank you, councillor Campbell. Can I have a seconder? Are you seconding or are you a question? Councillor Dougal. All those in favour say aye. Those against, there are none. Thank you, councillors. Carried. 9.9, who do we have here? Financial performance report, month 1 to month 3, 25-26, page 357 on your reports. Maren.
Okay, so this report is to provide councillors with a high-level overview of council's financial performance to date for the first quarter for this financial year. Key highlights from that report is indicating an operating revenue that's currently forecast about 1 million above budget, mainly due to funding agreements received from the Ministry for Primary Industries and Waikato Regional Council for the Wallaby program, and also due to a greater volume of consents forecasted to be processed during the year. This is partially offset by reduced finance revenue due to lower interest rates and lower fees and charges as a result of a delay in the implementation of the National Ticketing System project. Operating expenditure is sitting at 2.1 million under budget and mainly due to reduced finance costs from OCR reductions, reduced borrowing needs as a result of capital work delays and government funding in relation to those capital works, and also timing changes for loan repayments for Quayside's debt. This is offset by increased contract costs in biosecurity for the Wallaby and Wilding conifer programs, which is supported by the Ministry for Primary Industries and Waikato Regional Council. So this results in a forecast of 5.5 million operating surplus, which is 3.1 million higher than what was covered in the annual plan. Capital expenditure is forecast at 47 million against a revised budget of 41 million. And that is partly due to, or primarily due to carry forwards of capital works from last financial year into this year, and a report is coming to council on the 16th of December to give you more insight around the capital carry forwards for that process. Treasury position, council has around 345 million in external loans and 347 million in investments, with investment returns averaging around 4.4% and your weighted average cost of borrowing at 3.9%, leaving council in a 0.5% net investment return position in that sense. In addition to that, this report is a complement to the online Insights digital reporting tool, which gets released and published every month for council accessibility. We note that we haven't yet had the opportunity to take council through a demo of that, and we'll be looking to schedule that in a forthcoming meeting and advise councillors accordingly.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Crosby.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kamaran. I'm just quite interested in page 366, the year-to-date reserve balances. And if you look at the general funds reserve, taking away the 70 million, there's been quite substantial growth over the regional fund from 23 of 1.1 to forecast 2026, 17.8. What's the drivers for that? Main drivers. I know there's a number, but
the main drivers, councillor, is from the during the LTP and the way that we've set rates, especially in the public transport. We have a reduced program in that activity as a result of unfunded NLTP projects. So those surpluses from those activities just flow right through into that reserve. That's kind of the main contributor, but there are others as well, but that's the main one.
Any other questions, councillors? Can I have a mover and seconder to receive the report, please? Councillor Defoe, seconder. All those in favour say aye. Those against, there are none. Thank you, councillors. Carried. Thank you, staff. 9.10, report on exercise of Chief Executive's delegation during, how do you say that name? Interregnum period. Page 369 on your agendas. And that's presented by Monique and Cindy.
For the councillors, this is very much a procedural report, and as noted, the Chief Executive had already advised you of the exercise of this delegation, but this is the formal reporting on that. Happy to take any questions.
Councillors? There are none. Sorry. Councillor McMillan moving, seconder. Councillor Defoe. All those in favour say aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Monique. 9.11, appointment of acting chief executive, page 373. Sorry, who moved that report? Councillor Campbell, seconder. Councillor Defoe. Discussion? Councillor Dougal.
I'd just like to acknowledge that this is obviously the chief executive taking some leave over the Christmas period, but I'd also just like to move a motion of thanks to all our staff that work over the Christmas period. We are a 24/7 operation, and just a note of thanks from all the councillors to all our staff that spend the holiday period looking after our environment. Thank you. And yeah, second the motion.
Second the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those against? There are none. Carried. Thank you, councillors.
Through the chair, we now have an adjournment because the next fixed item that could not be changed on the agenda is at 11:45. It's the Insurance Council coming to speak. So we will have a formal adjournment until then. The only option would be if I can get staff, Mark Townsend available, we could potentially go into confidential now and cover that item. And that will make it a little, so you fill some of the gaps. So we'll try to make that happen. Yeah? So just give it a couple of minutes and we'll see if we can get Mark in here and we'll go into confidential to cover that item. And then we'll have to adjourn after that until 11:45. Thank you. So just be patient.
I know, sorry, councillors, what I need from you now is just a mover and seconder to move into confidential. Thank you, councillor Scrimger and councillor Dougal. Mover and seconder, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you.